When Scrooge awoke, it was so dark that looking out of bed, he could scarcely distinguish the transparent window from the opaque walls of his chamber. The chimes of a neighboring church struck the 4 quarters. So he listened for the hour. The heavy bell went regularly up to 12, then stopped. 12. Scrooge lay there until he remembered on a sudden that the ghost had warned him of a visitation when the bell tolled 1. He resolved to lie awake until the hour was past, and, considering that he could no more go to sleep than to go to heaven, this was, perhaps, the wisest resolution in his power. The quarter was so long that he was more than once convinced he must have sunk into a doze unconsciously and missed the clock. At length, it broke upon his listening ear.
Ding dong!
1/4 past.
Ding dong!
1/2 past.
Ding dong!
1/4 to it.
Ding dong!
The hour itself and nothing else.
He spoke before the hour bell sounded, which it now did with a deep, dull, hollow, melancholy 1. Light flashed up in the room upon the instant, and the curtains of his bed were drawn aside, and Scrooge, starting up into a half-recumbent attitude, found himself face to face with the unearthly visitor who drew them.
It was a strange figure, like a child, yet not so like a child as like an old man viewed through some supernatural medium, which gave it the appearance of having receded from the view and being diminished to a child's proportions. Its hair, which hung about its neck and down its back, was white as if with age, and yet the face had not a wrinkle in it, and the tenderest bloom was on the skin. It wore a tunic of the purest white, and round its waist was bound a lustrous belt, the sheen of which was beautiful. It held a branch of fresh green holly in its hand, and, in singular contradiction to that wintry emblem, had its dress trimmed with summer flowers.
Are you the spirit whose coming was foretold to me?
I am. I am the ghost of Christmas past.
Long past?
No, your past.
Scrooge made bold to inquire what business brought it there.
Your welfare. Rise and walk with me.
Scrooge, finding that the spirit made towards the window, clasped its robe in supplication.
I am mortal and liable to fall.
Bear but a touch of my hand, and you shall be upheld in more than this.
As the words were spoken, they passed through the wall and stood upon an open country road with fields on either side. The city had completely vanished. Not a vestige of it was to be seen. The darkness and the mist had vanished with it, for it was a clear, cold winter day with snow upon the ground.
Good heaven! I was bred in this place. I was a boy here.
The spirit gazed upon him mildly. Its gentle touch, though it had been light and instantaneous, appeared still present to the old man's sense of feeling. He was conscious of 1,000 odors floating in the air, each one connected with 1,000 thoughts and hopes and joys and cares long, long forgotten.
Your lip is trembling. And what is that upon your cheek?
Scrooge muttered, with an unusual catching in his voice, and begged the ghost to lead him where it would.
You recollect the way?
Remember it. I could walk it blindfold.
Strange to have forgotten it for so many years. Let us go on.
They walked along the road, Scrooge recognizing every gate and post and tree, until a little market town appeared in the distance, with its bridge, its church, and winding river. The school is not quite deserted. A solitary child, neglected by his family, is left there still. Scrooge and the ghost went into a long, bare, melancholy room, made barer still by lines of plain deal forms and desks. At one of these, a lonely boy was reading near a feeble fire.
These are but shadows of things that have been. They have no consciousness of us.
I wish, but it's too late now.
What is the matter?
Nothing. There was a boy singing a Christmas carol at my door last night. I should like to have given him something, that's all.
Let us see another Christmas.
Scrooge's former self grew larger at the words, and the room became a little darker and more dirty. The panels shrunk, the windows cracked, fragments of plaster fell from the ceiling, and the naked lass were shown instead. But how all of this came about, Scrooge knew no more than you do. He only knew that it was quite correct that everything had happened so as time had passed. So there he was, alone again, when all the other boys had gone home for the jolly holidays.
A door opened, and a girl came darting in, and putting her arms about his neck and often kissing him, addressed him as her dear, dear brother.
I've come to bring you home, dear brother, home for good and all, home for ever and ever. Father is so much kinder than he used to be. That home's like heaven. He spoke so gentle to me one dear night when I was going to bed, that I was not afraid to ask him once more if you could come home. And he said, yes, you should, and sent me in a coach to bring you. And we ought to be together all Christmas long and have the merriest of time in all the world.
Always a delicate creature whom a breath might have withered, but she had a large heart. She died a woman and had, as I think, children.
One child?
True. Your nephew.
Yes.
Although they had but that moment left the school behind them, they were now in the busy thoroughfares of a city where shadowy passengers passed and repassed, where shadowy carts and coaches battled for the way, and all the strife and tumult of a real city were. It was made plain enough by the dressing of the shops that here too it was Christmas time again. But it was evening, and the streets were lighted up. The ghost stopped at a certain warehouse door and asked Scrooge if he knew it.
Know it? I was apprenticed here.
They went in. At sight of an old gentleman in a Welsh wig sitting behind such a high desk that if it had been 2 inches taller, he must have knocked his head against the ceiling. Scrooge cried in great excitement,
Why, it's old Fezziwig! Bless his heart! It's Fezziwig alive again!
Old Fezziwig laid down his pen and looked up at the clock, which pointed to the hour of 7. He rubbed his hands and adjusted his capacious waistcoat, laughed all over himself, and called out in a comfortable, oily, rich, fat, jovial voice, "Yo-ho there, Ebenezer! Yo-ho there, Dick!"
Scrooge's former self, now grown a young man, came briskly in, accompanied by his fellow prentice.
Dick Wilkins, to be sure. Bless me, yes. There he is. He was very much attached to me, was Dick. Poor Dick. Dear, dear.
Old Fezziwig said, "Yo-ho, my boys! No more work tonight. Christmas Eve, Dick. Christmas, Ebenezer. Clear away, my lads, and let's have lots of room here. Hilly-ho, Dick. Cheer up, Ebenezer."
Clear away? There was nothing they wouldn't have cleared away or couldn't have cleared away with old Fezziwig looking on. It was done in a minute. Every movable was packed off as if it were dismissed from public life forevermore. The floor was swept and watered, the lamps were trimmed, fuel was heaped upon the fire, and the warehouse was as snug and warm and dry and bright a ballroom as you would desire to see upon a winter's night.
In came a fiddler with a music book and went up to the lofty desk and made an orchestra of it and tuned like 50 stomach aches. In came Mrs. Fezziwig, one vast, substantial smile. In came 3 Miss Fezziwigs, beaming and lovable. In came the 6 followers whose hearts they broke. In came all the young men and women employed in the business. In they all came, one after another, some shyly, some boldly, some gracefully, some awkwardly, some pushing, some pulling. In they all came, anyhow and everyhow.
There were dances and there were forfeits, and more dances, and there was cake, and there was a great piece of cold roast, and there were mince pies and plenty of beer. But the great effect of the evening came when the fiddler struck up after dinner. Then old Fezziwig stood out to dance with Mrs. Fezziwig. As to her, she was worthy to be his partner in every sense of the word. If that's not high praise, tell me higher, and I'll use it.
When the clock struck 11, this domestic ball broke up. Mr. and Mrs. Fezziwig took their stations, one on either side of the door, and shaking hands with every person individually as he or she went out, wished him or her a Merry Christmas. When everybody had retired but the 2 prentices, they did the same to them, and thus the cheerful voices died away, and the lads were left to their beds, which were under a counter in the back shop.
During the whole of this time, Scrooge's heart and soul were in the scene and with his former self. He remembered everything and enjoyed everything.
A small matter to make these silly folks so full of gratitude.
Small?
Why, is it not? He has spent but a few pounds of your mortal money. 3 or 4, perhaps?
It isn't that. It isn't that, Spirit. He has the power to render us happy or unhappy, to make our service light or burdensome, a pleasure or a toil. Say that his power lies in words and looks, in things so slight and insignificant that it is impossible to add and count them up. What then? The happiness he gives is quite as great as if it cost a fortune.
He felt the Spirit's glance and stopped.
What is the matter?
Nothing in particular.
Something, I think.
No. I should like to be able to say a word or two to my clerk just now. That's all.
My time grows short. Quick.
This was not addressed to Scrooge or to anyone whom he could see, but it produced an immediate effect. For again Scrooge saw himself. He was older now, a man in the prime of life. His face had not the harsh and rigid lines of later years, but it had begun to show the wear and signs of care and avarice. There was an eager, greedy, restless motion in the eye, which showed the passion that had taken root. He was not alone, but sat by the side of a fair young girl in a morning dress. in whose eyes there were tears.
It matters little. To you, very little. Another idol has displaced me. And if it can cheer and comfort you in time to come, as I would have tried to do, I have no just cause to grieve.
But what idol has displaced you, Belle?
A golden one. I have seen your nobler aspirations fall off one by one until the master passion gain engrosses you.
I am not changed toward you.
Our contract is an old one. When it was made, you were another man.
But have I ever sought release?
In words, no, never.
In what then?
In a changed nature, in an altered spirit, in another atmosphere of life, another hope at its great end. In everything that made my love of any worth or value in your sight. If you were free today, tomorrow, yesterday, can I even believe that you would choose a dowerless girl? I release you with a full heart for the love of him you once were. You may. The memory of what has passed half makes me hope you will. Have painted this a very, very brief time, and you will dismiss the recollection of it as an unprofitable dream from which it happened that well you awoke. May you be happy in the life you have chosen.
She left him, and they parted.
Spirit, show me no more. Conduct me home. Why do you delight to torture me?
One shadow more.
Near to the winter fire sat a beautiful young girl, so like that last that Scrooge believed it was the same, until he saw her, now a comely matron, sitting opposite her daughter.
And now Scrooge looked on more attentively than ever when the master of the house, having his daughter leaning fondly on him, sat down with her and her mother at his own fireside. And when he thought that such another creature, quite as graceful and as full of promise, might have called him father, and been a springtime in the haggard winter of his life, his sight grew very dim indeed.
Belle, I saw an old friend of yours this afternoon.
Who was it?
Guess.
How can I? I don't know. Mr. Scrooge?
Mr. Scrooge it was. I passed his office window, and as it was not shut up and he had a candle inside, I could scarcely help seeing him. His partner lies upon the point of death, I hear, and there he sat alone. Quite alone, I do believe. Quite alone in the world.
Spirit, remove me from this place.
I told you these were the shadows of the things that have been, that they are what they are. Do not blame me.
I cannot bear it. Leave me. Take me back. Haunt me no longer.
Scrooge was conscious of being exhausted and overcome by an irresistible drowsiness, and further, of being in his own bedroom. He had barely time to reel to bed before he sank into a heavy sleep.